I'm going to read into Sigmund's question a bit because we've talked about it before, and I remember posing this question to you years ago after I had done a sampling and a review of recruits and their status in South Florida. And I looked at it, and then I posed the question to you, and this is not feasible, but if Miami stayed home in terms of recruiting and just brought in the top players from South Florida, they could field a top 10 football team theoretically because there's enough players down there. They could just sit at home, get the bulk of players. And actually, I remember going down the list and thinking Miami can't even sign all the 4 stars and hire in their territory because they don't have enough slots.
Correct.
And so just to extend on Sigmund's question, I guess in theory they could stay home, but there would obviously be drawbacks to doing that in regards to building relationships and showing yourself to be a national program.
Yeah. So, I mean, so the question is, what do I think about Miami's coaches going out of state more for recruiting? And I just had, had to look this up just so that I had, the factual basis from which to speak. Miami has offered 237 players as of right now, today in this class. 107 of them are from Florida, So that's 45% of the offers that have gone out have been to Florida natives. I don't think that that's crazy. I don't think that, you're 10 offers away from 50-50 in-state, out-of-state. I don't think that that's crazy. With the foundation of your class being local, if I click again and I go from offers to commits, which is a piece I still need to write. I'm sorry that I have not gotten to that. We have 10 commitments right now, and all 10 are Florida natives. So, if you take those off of the offer list, so you're talking 107 out of 227 that are not committed are from Florida. That's still a high percentage. So I don't feel bad about that. I don't feel that we're ignoring things or ignoring guys locally. Sure, are there some kids who would like to get offers? There's a kid in Broward County who went to Terravella for a while. He transferred to Western, defensive end named Anthony Coxum. You've probably seen his tweets on Twitter. He is a loud Canes fan. I mean, he wants that offer. He wants to wear the orange and green. This is a kid who plays defensive end, 6'2", 235. He went to Western last year where James Williams, who's a 5-star, was. They won their district for the first time in forever, or made it to the playoffs, Western did, and everything. He does not have a Miami offer yet, but he finally got his first offer yesterday from Florida State. So now you're looking, okay, is this a player who now is a P5 level player where, Miami's going to offer him or things like that? So I just say that to say that there is a player out there who might be able to be added to the offer list. I know last cycle, Wesley Neal from Gulliver, who was 5'11", 310-pound defensive tackle, he wanted a Miami offer forever. That offer finally came, but it wasn't committable, so he ended up going elsewhere. There are players around who Miami could go after and eventually extend offers to in the local area, and especially in the state of Florida, and that's fine. A lot of these staff members, however, have relationships elsewhere as well. You look at Rhett Lashley, who was out in Texas for a while. You're offering guys out there. Garen Justice coached with him, and he's been all over around the country. So he's offering guys who he has relationships with, because you have to play it's a tough balancing act. It's a razor's edge, because you want to have guys from the local area. You want to have guys who want to be Hurricanes, and you want to have the best players to fit your needs. And sometimes those aren't all the same guy. You know what I mean? So when Miami needed a 5-star running back with elusive ability in the open field, who could catch the ball, who could run, who was a game breaker, kick return, punt return, things like that. And he, so if you're looking for a local guy who wants to be a Hurricane and he fulfills your need, there was a time when that guy was Duke Johnson from Miami Norland Senior High School, who was a walking distance around the corner from Hard Rock Stadium. And you went and you got Duke Johnson, and boom, and all 3 of those tick boxes get ticked with the same guy. Sometimes that doesn't happen. So then if you're looking like, okay, well, we need a guy at a position. We need an offensive tackle. Marcus Tate from Fort Lauderdale, he's going elsewhere. Julian Armella, who just transferred from St. Thomas down to Gulliver to be closer to his family because he was making a drive every day, he's a guy who's probably going to go elsewhere. The Doomerville kid, he went to Oklahoma. He went elsewhere. So if we're not getting those guys locally, so they are local guys, one check. They didn't want to be Hurricanes, clearly, because they went elsewhere. they didn't come here or they didn't satisfy your roster need either. So we're only hitting 1 out of 3 things. Now that necessitates us to go look elsewhere. And I think we have a staff who is able and willing to do that instead of pining away and waiting for the guys that they know that they're not going to get, especially locally. In this whole diatribe of an answer, I will say that if you, as recruiting fan, Miami Hurricanes fan, are thinking, hey, I would prefer to see a couple more of these offers go out locally right now. So instead of it being 107 out of 127 offers in the state of Florida, I would like that to be 137 out of 127. I would like there to be 30 more offers in state at this point of time, as opposed to out of state. I'm not going to fight you on that, but I think that while Miami is starting to cast a wide net to be a nationally recruiting team, the focus is still starting from here and then expanding out if we're not able to necessarily get those connections that we're looking for. So I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing, and I don't think that we're in the place of a Florida State from a few years ago when I kept trying to tell them they're playing too many away games in recruiting. I don't think that Miami's there. But when you have guys like a Steven Ortiz, again, who several connected people know him and his family, and he's like, yo, I want that Miami offer. I know that I live in Arizona right now, but like I'm trying to go to Miami. And Miami said, thanks, but no thanks to that. That is also a glimpse at maybe they're in certain areas focusing back here a little bit more than other places. So it is still a balancing act, and I think that Miami's doing an okay job of it right now. We can revisit this further along if there's a top local guy and we're just ignoring him.
So I got to think that while it's a balancing act at Miami, I would think that the balancing act is easier to maintain at Miami than it is for other top-notch schools across the country that don't have as fertile recruiting beds. Meaning that looking at Miami's coaching staff, of course, you've got plenty of players in South Florida, plus you have the ties that you just outlined. And if those ties go back to someplace like Texas, where there are 4 stars on every street corner, just like in South Florida, then you obviously pursue those ties. If you have one of your better recruiters or better coaches on your coaching staff and his ties are to Utah or somewhere like that, and it's going to dry up pretty quickly, and it's just not worth exhausting the efforts to continue those unless you've got 1 or 2 connections where, hey, this kid's really good and he does meet our standard of quality of play and we can go grab him. Sure, you do that. But at the same time, I think about places like Nebraska, Wisconsin, Iowa that have definitely a football standard and are compete for championships, and they have to play the game of we have to look good in state as though we are recruiting in state, we are bringing in the top players, and we care about our state and making those connections with high school football coaches here, but we're trying to compete on a national level, and we know we can't do that and fill up 105 roster spots with kids from Iowa. So they have to play that game and then if they have a situation where some of the top kids in state, like you just pointed out at Miami, don't want to go to Iowa, they want to go elsewhere, they're going to Penn State and Ohio State and Texas and going other places, then they don't want to reach for the 17th ranked kid in Iowa because the 17th ranked kid in Iowa is not the 17th ranked kid at Miami, and Iowa's trying to compete for championships, for example.
Yeah, and I mean, just like, for example, a quick perusal of the Iowa roster, 66 of their scholarship players are from Iowa, I believe, with just like the find function I used on Google here. So, if it's slightly different than that, yeah, but you're talking 66 out of 85-ish, and then there might be a couple walk-ons, so maybe you drop that down to 58, 60 out of your 85, but you're mainly going to stay home. Miami has similar numbers, so it's just kind of, and we got the number 1 offensive lineman out of Iowa 4 years ago, Zach Dykstra, who is now transferred elsewhere because his career did not pan out here. But, it is, and this is the thing, the notion of a local recruit changes for Miami versus other places. It just does. I mean, because a local recruit to USC and to Miami is like local as in I get in my car and I go down the street to La Habra, or I go down the street to Coral Gables Senior High School, or what, I mean, depending on which school you're talking about. A local recruit for Iowa is anywhere within a 7-hour drive. You know what I mean? So there are different iterations to what recruiting looks like and what those standards and things look like for different programs, because different programs are in different places, literally and metaphorically.